Commander Zethka stood on the bridge of the massive ship called Eternal Watcher. His purple skin glowed softly in the dim light. After traveling for many years, they had finally reached the small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, Earth, the same world they had visited so long ago that most of his crew had forgotten it ever existed. 500,000 years was a very long time, even for the Zalathi people who lived much longer than most species. Zethka was old, but not old enough to remember the first visit. Only the ancient records kept in their great libraries told the story of this small world and its simple creatures. The records were clear. Earth was home to barely intelligent creatures who walked on two legs. They used simple stone tools and lived in small groups. The Zalathi scientists had studied them for a short time before moving on to more interesting worlds. The creatures, called humans, were noted as having potential, but were far from becoming a real civilization. Now, 500,000 years later, the Zalathi Empire had grown tired of exploring new worlds. They decided to revisit old ones to see how they had changed. Earth was on the list, but it was not considered important. Most of the crew thought it would be a boring stop before moving on to more developed worlds. "Sir, we are approaching the Sol system," reported his second officer, Velna. Her voice carried the typical Zalathi tone of calm efficiency. "Long-range sensors are beginning to scan the system." Zethka nodded and walked to the main viewing screen. The stars shifted as their ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Ahead of them, a yellow star burned brightly, surrounded by several planets. The third planet from the star was their destination. "Begin standard survey procedures," Zethka ordered. "I want a complete scan of the planet's surface. Look for signs of technological development. After all this time, they might have learned to make metal tools." The crew worked quietly at their stations. The Eternal Watcher was equipped with the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. They could detect even the smallest changes in a planet's development. Usually the results were predictable. Most species followed similar patterns of growth. But something was wrong. Velna looked up from her station with confusion on her face. "Sir, the sensors are having trouble getting clear readings of the planet." "What kind of trouble?" Zethka moved closer to examine the data. "There appears to be some kind of interference. An energy field of some sort surrounding the entire planet. It's blocking our deep scans." Zethka felt a small chill run down his spine. Energy fields around entire planets were not natural. They required advanced technology and enormous amounts of power. The primitive humans from the records could never build such a thing. "Could it be another species?" he asked. "Perhaps someone else has colonized the planet." "Unknown, sir. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." As they moved closer to Earth, the interference grew stronger. Their advanced sensors, which could normally see through solid rock and detect life forms from great distances, were being completely blocked. The planet appeared as a glowing sphere of energy on their screens. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "I'm receiving a transmission." Zethka's blood ran cold. A transmission meant intelligence. It meant technology. It meant the primitive. Humans were no longer primitive. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared made the entire bridge crew step backward in shock. A human face filled the screen, but this was not the simple, confused face of a primitive creature. This human had intelligent eyes that seemed to look right through them. The human's expression was calm, almost amused. "Welcome back to Earth," the human said in perfect Zalathi language. "We have been waiting for you." Silence filled the bridge. How could these creatures know their language? How could they have been waiting? The Zalathi had not announced their return. Their ship had been traveling for decades to reach this system. "I am Commander Zethka of the Zalathi Empire," he finally managed to say. "We are conducting a routine survey of this system." The human smiled, showing white teeth. "We know who you are, Commander. We know about your empire, your travels, and your previous visit to our world. We have learned much in the time you have been away." How do you know our language? We have had many teachers over the years. Would you like to land and meet in person? We have prepared a special welcome for you." Zeth-Ka looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at the screen with expressions of shock and growing fear. This was not what anyone had expected. The primitive tool users from the records could not have developed this level of technology in such a short time, but they had come so far to complete their survey, and his scientific curiosity was stronger than his fear. "We accept your invitation," he said carefully. "We will send a small diplomatic team to the surface." "Excellent," the human replied. "Please follow the guidance beacons to the landing site. And Commander, bring all your senior officers. You will not want to miss what we have prepared." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. "Sir," Velna whispered, "this doesn't feel right. How could they have developed so quickly? And how do they know so much about us?" Zeth-Ka stared at the planet below. The energy field around it pulsed like a heartbeat. "I don't know, but we need to find out. Prepare the shuttle. Select 20 of our best officers for the diplomatic mission." As the crew prepared for landing, Zeth-Ka couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. The records clearly showed that humans were barely intelligent creatures who lived simple lives. But the being on the screen had been far from simple. Its eyes had held knowledge and secrets that made Zeth-Ka's skin crawl. The guidance beacons appeared on their screens, leading them to a specific location on Earth's surface. The beacons themselves were a sign of advanced technology. They transmitted on frequencies that only the most developed civilizations could produce. "Sir, we're receiving landing coordinates," reported the pilot. "The landing site appears to be some kind of large structure. It's enormous." Through the shuttle's windows, they could see the landing site growing larger. It was indeed enormous, stretching for kilometers in every direction. The structure was made of materials they didn't recognize, and it gleamed with an inner light that seemed to pulse with life. As they landed, Zeth-Ka saw humans waiting for them. These were not the primitive creatures from the records. They stood tall and confident, wearing clothes made from advanced materials. Their eyes held intelligence that seemed to pierce right through him. "Welcome to Earth," said the same human from the transmission, stepping forward as they exited the shuttle. "Welcome to the Galactic Heritage Museum. We have so much to show you." The name sent another chill through Zeth-Ka's body. A museum about galactic heritage suggested knowledge of many species beyond just Earth and the Zalathi Empire. It suggested contact with civilizations from across the galaxy. As they were led toward the entrance of the massive structure, Zeth-Ka noticed something that made his blood freeze. Along the walls of the entrance were symbols and writing in dozens of different languages. He recognized some of them as belonging to species that had disappeared from the galaxy long ago. Species that had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only empty worlds and unanswered questions. The humans led them through the entrance with smiles on their faces, but Zeth-Ka began to suspect that those smiles hid something terrible, something that would explain where all those missing civilizations had gone, and why Earth had been waiting for them to return. The human who greeted them introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, the museum's head curator. She spoke their language perfectly, without any accent or hesitation. As she led the Zalathi group through the entrance, Commander Zeth-Ka noticed that the walls were covered with strange metal that seemed to shift and move when he wasn't looking directly at it. "This is our main exhibition hall," Dr. Chen said with obvious pride in her voice. "We've been working on it for quite some time. Each display represents a different species that has visited our world over the years." The hall was enormous, stretching so far that Zeth-Ka could barely see the other end. Along both sides were glass cases, each one glowing with soft light. As they walked closer to the first display, Zeth-Ka felt his heart begin to beat faster. Inside the glass case was a creature he recognized from his studies. It was a Graxian, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. The creature floated, in some kind of liquid, perfectly preserved. Its forearms were spread wide, and its large black eyes stared out at nothing. "The Graxians," Dr. Chen explained casually, as if she were discussing the weather. "They visited us about 200,000 years ago. Wonderful teachers, they showed us how to manipulate energy fields and bend light to our will. Very generous people. But the Graxians still exist, Velna said nervously. They have a large empire in the Andromeda sector. Dr. Chen tilted her head slightly. Do they? How interesting. This one seemed to be under the impression that he was the last of his kind when he arrived here. He was looking for a new homeworld for his people. Zethka stared at the creature in the case. The Graxians were indeed still around, but their numbers had been mysteriously dropping for the past few 100,000 years. Their colonies kept going silent, one by one, with no explanation. They moved to the next display. This one contained a creature with 6 legs and silver skin. Zethka had never seen anything like it, but the nameplate identified it as a void dweller. The void dwellers were fascinating, Dr. Chen continued. They could fold space itself, traveling between stars in just seconds. They taught us their technology before they decided to stay with us permanently. Such devoted teachers. Stay permanently? Zethka asked. Oh yes, many of our visitors choose to remain here after sharing their knowledge with us. We've become quite good at making them feel welcome. As they continued down the hall, Zethka began to recognize more and more of the creatures in the display, cases, species that had been reported missing over the centuries, civilizations that had simply vanished from the galaxy without explanation, the Christine hive mind, known for their incredible mathematical abilities, the plasma speakers, who could communicate across vast distances without any technology, the Iron Lords, who had built machines that could think for themselves. All of them were here, floating in glass cases like trophies. How many species have visited Earth? Velna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen looked thoughtful. Let me see. We have about 3,000 different species on display here, plus another 12,000 in our storage facilities. We've had to expand the museum several times over the years. 3,000 species. Zethka felt sick. That represented a significant portion of all known intelligent life in the galaxy, and they were all here, preserved like specimens in a laboratory. Each species taught us something new, Dr. Chen continued. The Thought Weavers showed us how to read minds. The Starburners demonstrated antimatter manipulation. The Shadow Walkers explained how to move through dimensions. We've learned so much from all our visitors. They reached a section of the museum that was different from the rest. Here the display cases were larger, and they contained not just individual creatures but entire groups, families, communities. This is our newer section, Dr. Chen explained. We realized that studying individuals only gave us part of the picture. We needed to understand how these species functioned as groups. In one case, a family of 4-armed beings sat around what looked like a dinner table. They were frozen in time, their expressions showing surprise and fear. The nameplate, Reed Harmony Singer's final performance. Another case showed a group of insect-like creatures huddled together. Their delicate wings were spread in what might have been a defensive posture. The Hive Builders, Emergency Council Session. Zethka realized that these weren't just preserved specimens. These were creatures that had been alive, going about their normal lives when they were somehow captured and placed in these cases. How do you preserve them so perfectly? He found himself asking, even though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Trade secret, Dr. Chen said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Let's just say we've had a lot of practice over the years. They reached another section where the cases contained not just creatures but their technology as well. Weapons, tools, spacecraft, and devices that Zethka couldn't identify. Some of the technology was familiar to him, but much of it was far more advanced than anything the Zalathi Empire had ever developed. We don't just study the species themselves, Dr. Chen explained. We study everything about them. Their culture, their technology, their biology, their psychology. Knowledge is the most valuable thing in the universe, don't you think? One display case caught Zethka's attention. It contained what looked like a Zalathi communication device, but it was much more advanced than any he had seen. The nameplate read Early Zalathi Contact First Visit Artifacts. You kept things from our previous visit, he asked. Of course. The team that visited Earth 500,000 years ago was very helpful. They taught us about galactic navigation and energy weapons. We still use some of their techniques today. But our records show that the survey team returned safely. Dr. Chen's smile became wider. Did they? How interesting. I suppose it depends on what you consider safe to mean. They continued walking, passing hundreds more display cases. Each one contained creatures that represented lost civilizations, vanished species, and forgotten empires. The museum was a graveyard of galactic history, and the humans were its caretakers. Why do you do this? Velna asked suddenly. Why do you collect all these species? Dr. Chen stopped walking and turned to face them. For the first time since their arrival, her friendly expression disappeared. What replaced it was something cold and calculating. Because we can, she said simply. Because we need to. Because every species that visits our world brings us something new to learn. And learning is what humans do best. But these are entire civilizations, billions of lives. Dr. Chen corrected. These were entire civilizations. Now they're part of something greater. They're part of humanity's education. As they reached the end of the main hall, Zethka saw something that made his blood freeze completely. At the far end was a display, case larger than all the others. It was empty except for a small sign that read, Reserved Zalathi Empire Collection. Dr. Chen noticed where he was looking. Don't worry about that just yet, she said cheerfully. We have so much more to show you first. The really interesting part is downstairs. That's where we keep our active research subjects. She gestured toward a staircase that led down into darkness. Shall we continue the tour? The stairs led deep underground, far deeper than should have been possible. As they descended, Zethka noticed that the walls changed from the strange shifting metal to something that looked almost organic. The surface pulsed gently, like living tissue. The lower levels are much older than the museum above, Dr. Chen explained as they walked. This part was built during humanity's early period of development, back when we were still figuring out who we really were. The staircase ended at a massive metal door that had symbols carved into its surface. Zethka recognized some of them, but others were completely alien to him. Dr. Chen placed her hand on a panel beside the door, and it slid open with a quiet hiss. Beyond the door was a room unlike anything Zethka had ever seen. The walls were covered with screens showing images from across the galaxy, star maps, planetary surveys, and what looked like surveillance footage from hundreds of different worlds. In the center of the room was a large table with a three-dimensional map of the entire galaxy floating above it. Welcome to our real home, Dr. Chen said. This is where we keep our most important records. Other humans were working at stations around the room. They looked up as the group entered, and Zethka noticed that their eyes held the same cold intelligence he had seen in EO. Dr. Chen, these were not the friendly museum staff from upstairs. These people looked like soldiers or scientists engaged in serious work. Commander Zethka, Dr. Chen said, I think it's time you learned the truth about humanity. The real truth, not the simple story we tell most visitors. She walked to the floating galaxy map and pointed to a small section near the outer rim. This is where you found us 500,000 years ago. Earth, a small planet with primitive creatures using stone tools. Your records were correct about that. The map changed, showing a detailed view of the Earth system. But instead of one planet, it showed dozens of small objects surrounding the sun. What your records didn't mention, Dr. Chen continued, is that Earth was not humanity's original home. We didn't evolve here, we were brought here. Zethka felt confusion replacing his fear. Brought here? By whom? By a coalition of every advanced species in the galaxy. A coalition that included your own people, though I doubt your current government remembers it. The galaxy map changed again, now showing travel routes connecting thousands of star systems. Red lines crisscrossed the galaxy like a vast web. You see, Commander, humanity originally lived throughout the galaxy. We had no single homeworld because we didn't need one. We were explorers, travelers, learners. We moved from system to system, always curious about new things. Dr. Chen touched the map, and it zoomed in on various star systems. Each one showed evidence of human presence, cities, ships, and structures. But there was a problem with humanity's curiosity, she continued. We didn't just want to learn about other species. We wanted to learn from them. And the most effective way to learn from someone is to study them very, very closely. The screens around the room began showing images that made Zethka's skin crawl. Humans working in laboratories, dissecting alien creatures, conducting experiments on living beings. The images were old, but the expressions on the humans' faces were the same cold intelligence he saw in the room around him. We were very good at learning, Dr. Chen said. Perhaps too good. Every species we encountered taught us something new. Their technology, their biology, their psychology. We absorbed it all. You were conquering other species. Conquering? No, Commander. We were studying them. There's a difference, though I admit the end result was often the same. The galaxy map showed more red lines, but now they were accompanied by dates. Zethka realized he was looking at a timeline of human expansion across the galaxy. The other species became concerned, Dr. Chen continued. They saw what happened to civilizations that encountered humanity. We didn't destroy them exactly, but we changed them. We studied them so thoroughly that they became part of us. She gestured to one of the screens, which showed an image of creatures that looked similar to the Graxians in the museum upstairs. But these creatures were different somehow, more human-like in their movements and expressions. Eventually, the Galactic Coalition decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to roam freely. So they made a plan. They would gather all humans from across the galaxy and place them on a single world, a prison world. The map zoomed in on Earth again. Now Zethka could see the energy field he had detected from orbit, but this view showed it as it really was. Not a defense system, but a cage. Earth was chosen because it was isolated and primitive. The Coalition brought all of humanity here and then did something very clever. They changed us. Dr. Chen touched a control, and the screen showed images of humans undergoing some kind of medical procedures. Aliens in protective suits worked on unconscious human subjects. They altered our genetics, reduced our intelligence, and erased our memories. They turned us from galactic predators into simple tool users. The humans your people found 500,000 years ago were the result of that genetic modification. Zethka stared at the screens in horror. You were prisoners. Prisoners who didn't even know they were prisoners. Exactly. And it worked, for a while. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity remained trapped in a primitive state. We used stone tools, lived in caves, and forgot that we had ever been anything more. But something changed, Velna said quietly. Dr. Chen nodded. Something did change. You see, the genetic modifications were not permanent. They were designed to fade over time, but very slowly. It would take hundreds of thousands of years for us to regain our original capabilities. She walked to another control panel, and the screens showed images of humans gradually changing over time. Stone tools became metal tools, small tribes became cities, and simple languages became complex civilizations. But the process was accelerated by something the Coalition didn't expect. Visitors. The screens now showed the museum upstairs, but from a different perspective. Zethka realized he was seeing it as it was built, layer by layer over thousands of years. Every time an alien species visited Earth, they brought with them something we needed: genetic material, technology, knowledge. Each visitor helped us remember a little more about who we really were. Dr. Chen smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely warm. Your people were actually our first teachers after the imprisonment. That Zalathi survey team from 500,000 years ago gave us our first glimpse of faster-than-light travel and energy weapons. But our records show they returned safely. They did return, Dr. Chen agreed. Some of them, the ones we allowed to leave, but they left behind much more than they realized. Genetic samples, technology, and most importantly, knowledge about the galaxy beyond Earth. The screens showed humans working with advanced technology, their primitive appearance, gradually giving way to the intelligent beings Zethka had met. Each species that visited Earth helped us unlock more of our original nature. The Graxians taught us energy manipulation. The Void Dwellers showed us space-folding technology. The Christine Hive Mind helped us understand group consciousness. And you killed them all, Zethka said. Not killed, Dr. Chen corrected. Preserved, studied, added to our knowledge base. They became part of humanity's awakening, just as your people will. She turned to face him directly, and Zethka saw something in her eyes that made his blood freeze. It was hunger. Not for food or power, but for knowledge and understanding. You see, Commander, your arrival here was not coincidence. We sent out signals across the galaxy, subtle ones designed to attract the curiosity of various species. We wanted visitors and we got them. You lured us here? We lured everyone here. Every species in our collection came to Earth because they received signals that aroused their scientific curiosity. Ancient ruins, unusual energy readings, signs of primitive civilizations that might be worth studying. Dr. Chen gestured to the galaxy map, which now showed hundreds of signal sources emanating from Earth over the past 500,000 years. And now, thanks to all our visitors, humanity is almost fully awakened. We remember who we are, we understand our true nature, and we have technology that combines the best knowledge from thousands of species. She walked back to the center of the room where the galaxy map continued to pulse with light. There's just one more step in our awakening, Commander. One final piece of genetic coding that we need to unlock our complete potential. Zethka felt a terrible certainty growing in his mind. What piece? Dr. Chen's smile became predatory. The piece that your people carry in their genes. The key that will allow us to leave Earth and return to our proper place in the galaxy. The screens around the room began showing images of humans, changing again. But this time the changes were different. These humans looked stronger, faster, more intelligent than anything Zethka had ever seen. Welcome to Earth, Commander, Dr. Chen said. Thank you for bringing us the final key to our freedom. As Dr. Chen finished speaking, alarms began to sound throughout the underground facility. Red lights flashed on the walls, and the humans at their workstations looked up with expressions of excitement rather than concern. Ah, Dr. Chen said, checking a device on her wrist. It's beginning. What's beginning? Commander Zethka demanded, but he already suspected he didn't want to know the answer. The final awakening, she replied simply. Your presence here, your genetic signature, has triggered the last stage of our restoration process. Humans all over the planet are beginning to remember who they really are. The screens around the room changed to show live feeds from locations across Earth. Zethka watched in growing horror as ordinary-looking humans began to transform before his eyes. Their movements became more fluid and graceful. Their eyes grew brighter and more focused. Some of them began to display abilities. That should have been impossible. On one screen, a human child was casually lifting objects with her mind, laughing as toys floated around her head. On another, a group of adults were having a conversation while standing in the middle of a busy street, completely ignoring the vehicles that passed harmlessly through their bodies. Dimensional shifting, Dr. Chen explained, noticing where he was looking. One of the abilities we learned from the Shadow Walkers, very useful for avoiding inconvenient obstacles. More screens showed humans displaying powers that Zethka recognized from the species in the museum upstairs. Energy manipulation from the Graxians, matter transformation from the Crystal Builders, telepathic communication from the Thought Weavers. This is impossible, Velna whispered. No single species can have all these abilities. You're right, Dr. Chen agreed. No single species can. But humanity was never a single species in the traditional sense. We were always something more adaptable, something that could incorporate the best traits of whatever we encountered. She walked to one of the workstations and began typing commands. The galaxy map in the center of the room changed to show a detailed analysis of human genetics. The coalition that imprisoned us thought they were removing our dangerous abilities, she continued. But they were wrong about how our genetics work. They couldn't remove our capabilities. They could only suppress them. And suppression isn't the same as destruction. The genetic analysis showed layers upon layers of dormant genetic code, like a vast library waiting to be unlocked. Every species we've encountered over the past 500,000 years has contributed something to our genetic recovery. Each visitor brought us closer to remembering our true nature. But we needed one final catalyst to complete the process. Us, Zethka said with growing dread. The Zalathi genetic signature contains something special, Dr. Chen confirmed. Your people were part of the original coalition that imprisoned humanity. Your genes carry the key that was used to lock away our abilities. When that key is present, our genetic locks can finally be broken. More alarms sounded, and the screens showed increasingly dramatic scenes from around the planet. Humans were not just displaying individual powers now. They were beginning to work together in ways that multiplied their abilities exponentially. On one screen, a group of humans stood in a circle around what looked like empty air. As Zethka watched, a massive structure began to materialize in the center of their circle. It was a spacecraft, but unlike any design he had ever seen. It incorporated elements from dozens of different species' technologies. Construction teams, Dr. Chen explained casually. They're building our new fleet. We've had the plans ready for quite some time, but we needed the full awakening to make them reality. Other screens showed similar scenes across the planet. Humans were creating technology, weapons, and vehicles that combined the best aspects of every species in their collection. The Earth's surface was rapidly transforming from a simple world into something that looked like the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. How long will this process take? Zethka asked, though he feared. The answer: it's already nearly complete, Dr. Chen replied, checking her device again. The genetic awakening happens very quickly once it begins. Within a few hours, every human on Earth will have access to their full capabilities. She gestured to one of the screens, which showed a human woman standing on a hilltop. The woman raised her hands, and the energy field that surrounded Earth began to shift and change. Instead of a cage, it was becoming something else entirely. The planetary defense grid is being converted into a launch system, Dr. Chen explained. For 500,000 years it kept us trapped here. Now it will help us reach the stars again. Zethka realized with horror that the humans had been planning this for much longer than he had imagined. How long have you known we were coming? We sent the signals that attracted you nearly 1,000 years ago, Dr. Chen said. We've been tracking your approach ever since. We had plenty of time to prepare. The screens now showed humans across the planet looking up at the sky with expressions of anticipation and hunger. They were no longer the friendly, curious people who had greeted the Zalathi delegation at the museum. These were predators preparing for a hunt. What do you plan to do now? Velna asked quietly. Dr. Chen turned to face them with that same cold smile. What humanity has always done, of course. We're going to explore. We're going to learn. We're going to study every interesting species we can find. You're going to conquer the galaxy. Conquer is such an ugly word, Dr. Chen said. We prefer to think of it as expanding our education. There's so much to learn out there, so many species we haven't met yet. She walked back to the galaxy map and began pointing to various star systems. The Andromedans have developed some fascinating biotechnology. The Core Worlds Alliance has made impressive advances in artificial intelligence. The Far Rim explorers have discovered new forms of energy we've never seen. Each system she pointed to began to glow red on the map. All of them will make excellent additions to our collection. The alarms stopped sounding, and the red lights changed to a steady blue glow. Dr. Chen smiled as she looked at her device. The awakening is complete, she announced. Every human on Earth now has access to their full genetic heritage. We are ready to return to our proper place in the galaxy. Through the screens, Zethka could see the changes in the humans. They moved with predatory grace, their eyes held intelligence that seemed to burn with inner fire, and they displayed casual control over forces that should have required massive technology to manipulate. Children played games that involved reshaping reality around them. Adults held conversations while simultaneously working on projects that spanned continents. Groups of humans focused their combined attention on problems and solved them in minutes that should have taken years. This is what humanity was always meant to be, Dr. Chen said with obvious pride. We are learners, adapters, incorporators of knowledge. We take the best of everything we encounter and make it part of ourselves. She gestured toward the stairs leading back to the museum level. Shall we return upstairs? I believe your crew on the ship is probably wondering what's taking so long. As they climbed the stairs, Zethka could hear sounds from the museum above. Not the quiet voices of tourists, but the excited chatter of predators discussing their next hunt. When they reached the main floor, the museum had changed. The display cases were still there, but now humans moved among them with purpose, studying the preserved specimens and taking notes. They were no longer just showing off their collection. They were preparing for practical application of what they had learned. Don't worry, Commander, Dr. Chen said as they walked toward the exit. Your people will be treated with the same respect we've shown all our previous guests. You'll become part of something much greater than yourselves. Through the museum's windows, Zethka could see their shuttle surrounded by humans. His crew members were standing nearby, but they looked confused and docile, as if they were in some kind of trance. We've already begun the preliminary studies of your crew, Dr. Chen explained. Nothing harmful, just some basic genetic sampling and neural mapping. We want to understand everything about how the Zalathi mind works. As they stepped outside, Zethka saw the true scale of what was happening. The massive structure that housed the museum was just one of hundreds that had appeared across the landscape. The humans had built an entire civilization while they were underground, and now that civilization was preparing for expansion. Ships were rising from the Earth's surface, not just the crude spacecraft he might have expected, but vessels that incorporated technology from thousands of species. The humans were not just awakening, they were mobilizing. Beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Chen said, following his gaze. Humanity is coming home to the galaxy. Commander Zethka watched in growing horror as more ships rose from Earth's surface. They weren't just spacecraft. They were predatory vessels that seemed to pulse with life and hunger. Each one incorporated technology from dozens of the species he had seen preserved in the museum, combined in ways that created something entirely new and terrifying. My ship, he managed to say, pointing toward the Eternal Watcher hanging in orbit above them. My crew. Dr. Chen smiled and checked her wrist device again. Oh, don't worry about them, Commander. They're perfectly safe. In fact, they're probably having the most educational experience of their lives. Through his personal communicator, Zethka could hear confused voices from his bridge crew. They were asking questions, trying to understand what was happening to their ship's systems. But their voices were becoming more distant and confused as he listened. What are you doing to them? He demanded. Nothing permanent, Dr. Chen assured him. We're just conducting some basic scans. Your ship's technology is quite impressive, and your crew's neural patterns are fascinating. We want to understand how Zalathi group dynamics work in crisis situations. On the screens visible through the museum windows, Zethka could see his ship being surrounded by smaller human vessels. They moved like a pack of hunters surrounding their prey, working together with perfect coordination. The Zalathi Empire will know what happened here, Velna said desperately. When we don't report back, they'll send more ships. Will they? Dr. Chen asked with genuine curiosity. That would be wonderful. We'd love to study more examples of your species. The more data we have, the better we can understand you. She gestured toward the sky, where more human ships were appearing. These were larger vessels, clearly designed for long-distance travel and extended operations. We've been preparing for galactic exploration for quite some time, she continued. We have detailed plans for visiting every inhabited system in the galaxy. Your people's arrival has simply moved up our timeline a bit. As they watched, one of the human ships moved alongside the Eternal Watcher. Zethka could see through his ship's windows as human figures began boarding his vessel. His crew wasn't resisting. They appeared to be cooperating willingly, though their movements looked strange and mechanical. Neural compliance, Dr. Chen explained, noticing his confusion. We've found that most species respond better to suggestion than to force. Your crew believes they're participating in a cultural exchange program. You're controlling their minds? Not controlling exactly. More like guiding. They're still themselves, but they're very interested in helping us learn about their technology and culture. It's quite remarkable how cooperative most species become once we explain the benefits of joining our educational program. More alarms began sounding, but these came from Zethka's own communicator. Emergency signals from Zalathi colonies and outposts across their territory. Dr. Chen tilted her head, listening to the signals. Oh my, it seems the awakening has had some unexpected effects. Our deep space monitoring systems are detecting interesting developments in your empire's territory. The screens in the museum changed to show star maps of the Zalathi Empire. Red warning indicators were appearing on system after system, indicating some kind of crisis or attack. What's happening? Zethka asked, though he suspected the answer would be terrible. Well, it turns out that when humanity awakens fully, it doesn't just affect the humans on Earth, Dr. Chen explained. You see, over the past 500,000 years, we've had visitors from many species, and many of those visitors carried human genetic material back to their homeworlds. The star map zoomed in on one of the red indicators. It showed a Zalathi colony world where something impossible was happening. Zalathi civilians were displaying abilities they shouldn't possess. They were moving objects with their minds, walking through solid walls, and working together with a level of coordination that was more human than Zalathi. Genetic contamination, Dr. Chen said cheerfully. Every species that visited Earth carried traces of human DNA back with them. Usually those traces remained dormant in their systems. But when humanity awakened here on Earth, it sent out a call, you might say, a signal that activated any dormant human genetics in other species. More colony worlds showed similar scenes. Zalathi people were changing, becoming something that was part Zalathi and part human. They were developing human curiosity, human adaptability, and human hunger for knowledge. This is impossible, Velna whispered. Genetics don't work that way. Normal genetics don't, Dr. Chen agreed. But human genetics were never normal. That's why the coalition found us so dangerous in the first place. We don't just adapt to new environments, we adapt other species to become more like us. The screens showed more colony worlds, then expanded to show other species' territories. The same thing was happening everywhere. Graxians were developing human traits. Christine hive minds were showing human individualism. Species across the galaxy were beginning to change in ways that made them more human-like. It's spreading, Zethka realized with horror. Yes, isn't it wonderful? Dr. Chen said with genuine enthusiasm. Humanity is returning to the galaxy, not just through conquest but through evolution. Every species that ever encountered us is becoming part of us. She walked to one of the windows and looked up at the sky, where hundreds of human ships were now visible. Of course, we're not just sitting back and waiting for genetic conversion to do all the work, she continued. We're also taking a more direct approach to galactic education. As they watched, the human ships began moving away from Earth in organized formations. They weren't scattering randomly across the galaxy. They were following specific routes toward predetermined targets. Each fleet has been assigned to a different sector, Dr. Chen explained. They carry specialists who understand the species they'll be encountering. We want to make sure our educational programs are tailored to each civilization's specific needs and capabilities. The largest formation of ships was heading directly towards Zalathi space. Your empire will be our first major study subject, Dr. Chen said. We're very excited to learn more about how large-scale governmental systems function under stress. You're going to destroy entire civilizations, Zethka said. Destroy? Oh no, Commander. We're going to preserve them. Every species we encounter will be carefully studied, documented, and added to our collection. Their knowledge will become part of humanity's knowledge. Their capabilities will become part of humanity's capabilities. She turned back to face him, and her eyes held that same cold hunger he had seen in the underground facility. Think of it as immortality in a way. These species will live on as part of something greater than they could ever have been alone. Through his communicator, Zethka could hear the voices from his ship becoming quieter and more distant. His crew was being absorbed into humanity's collection, just like thousands of species before them. The truly beautiful part, Dr. Chen Chiu continued, is that this time, we won't make the same mistakes we made before. The coalition that imprisoned us succeeded because humanity was scattered and disorganized. We were individual predators working alone. She gestured toward the fleets of ships moving away from Earth. But now we're coordinated. We're unified. We have a plan, and we have the combined knowledge of every species we've encountered over the past 500,000 years. This time there won't be anyone left to form a coalition against us. Zethka realized that he was witnessing the beginning of the end of galactic civilization as it had existed, not through war or conquest in the traditional sense, but through something far more thorough and permanent. Your museum, he said quietly. It's going to include everyone, isn't it? Dr. Chen smiled with genuine warmth. Eventually, yes. The Galactic Heritage Museum will truly be comprehensive. Every species, every culture, every form of intelligent life will be represented. She looked up at the stars with an expression of anticipation. And then, when we've learned everything there is to learn in this galaxy, we'll start looking for new ones to explore. As the last of the human ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying humanity's hunger to every corner of the galaxy, Dr. Chen turned back to Zethka with that predatory smile. Welcome to the collection, Commander. We have so much to learn from you. The screens in the museum went dark, and the only sounds were the quiet footsteps of humans moving through their vast collection, preparing to add entire civilizations to their displays. Humanity was coming home to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again.